Hi, it's Mike Gretzinger from Farming Smarter, and we're back here at the Saving Soils Planter Trials. These projects, this is funded by RBC Tech for Nature, as well as the Weston Family Foundation. The plots behind me are pretty peculiar and very interesting, and right now we're at the seeding stage for the springtime crops. So last fall we went out here and we put some winter wheat and some fall rye cover crops. We planted at different densities, and what we're looking at is we're looking at the features that those cover crops provide, both the advantages and the disadvantages that may entail. So behind me, we've got 3 different crops that have been seeded. There's corn and canola and dry beans, and they've been seeded into 3 very different arrangements of those cover crops. So in one case, we've done an untreated check where we just left the soil bare in the fall. In another case, we've put the cover crops in, but we sprayed and disked them earlier in the season. And in the third case, we actually left that crop as a living mulch. And you can see it's still quite green behind me, but it was sprayed just the other day, and it will start dying off right away. And with our first in-crop timing. So what's going to happen is we've got a number of different assessments that we're doing. So right now behind me, they're taking biomass of how much is left over. We're going to send that to the lab. We're going to get analysis of the plant nutrients that are in there, as well as the carbon that's being uptaken by the plant that's still living. And then we've got some other sensors as well. So we're looking at the effects that these crops, the cover crops, will have on the soil moistures, as well as the nutrient uptake. So we'll go take a closer look at the plots and give you a little more detail on what's happening there. So this right here is a Delta T moisture probe. We've got an auger bit to bore down into the soil, and this actually gets buried about 1 meter down into the ground. And then this little top piece comes off, and we have an instrument that goes all the way down into the bottom of the tube, and we'll take readings three times a week. And that gives us a point in time reading of what our soil moisture is looking like. And there's a band about 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, and 1 meter deep in the ground. And so that'll give us the soil moisture and see how that compares between crops like this that were obviously disked and then had canola planted in, versus something like this beside me with a huge living crop, cover crop between the rows. So this here is plant root simulator probes, PRS probes from Western Ag Innovations, and what these do is they basically simulate what the plant roots do. And so buried beneath there is actually a really thin membrane, and there's both cation and anion probes. And so what those will do is they'll pick up all the different cations and anions in the soil, NO3, different nutrients and things like that. And then those will stick to the membrane. We send them off to the lab, and they'll analyze exactly how much nutrients are available to those plants. And so we'll have some we're comparing between the rows versus on the row to see the effect that those cover crops had that were planted here earlier in the fall. And in some cases, this is obviously bare, but in case of some of the other plots, will be right on top of another row. So we see what effect those covers have on tying up available nutrients for the plant and minimizing the interaction that our typical fertilizers and other things have. So a really cool metric that we'll have for these studies here. So when it comes to newer practices or different practices for soil conservation, one of the most common questions, comments, and things we get is, when it comes to these cover crops, what kind of effect is it going to have on my next year's crop, and how effective is it? Especially here in southern Alberta, we're limited in moisture. We have very different species and stuff as they do in other parts of the world, and we just grow things differently. So we picked canola, corn, and dry beans because they're 3 fairly more common crops for our area here. They're definitely irrigated crops, and so they fit our growing system that we have. And the big question that we're looking at and kind of answering is, what effects do these cover crops have, whether they're good or bad? So we'd be looking at the end impact on our crop yield from having that in there, the end impacts on our moisture retention, how much carbon is conserved and sequestered throughout the year, as well as the kind of the nutrient cycles and how how some different crops may be affected. So that's just a little update of where we're at right now, but check in with us again in a couple weeks, and things here grow really fast, and we'll be at a completely different stage and probably a completely different look to what's behind me right now.